Welcome to OkState Daily. Casey Porter here, joined by Robbie Rainwater, as I am each and every week. In how sweep it is for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. We got our first taste of, not going to lie about it, kind of the pain in the rear, if you would, about BYU not being able to play on Sundays. Because, hey, you were going to have to play it on Thursday, Friday, Saturday anyways. And then with the weather on Saturday, you had to finish it on Friday. So just kind of, hey, it was a great weekend. You swept the weekend. That was a whole lot of fun. But knowing you were driving home on Friday and it was all over with for the weekend, that was kind of a bummer.
Yeah, like I actually had to do some yard work or something around the house this weekend because I couldn't sit around and watch baseball all weekend. So, good week for the Pokes and coming off a tough weekend last weekend and taking care of business the way they should have and beating teams that they should beat and in the fashion that they should beat them. So it was good to see them bounce back from tough weekend last week and take care of business the right way.
Totally agree that BYU, hey, if you want to be a College World Series team, if you want to be considered seriously as a contender, right, you got to do what you did to BYU this weekend, especially at home, especially on a short series like that. Having said that, first of all, you know as well as anybody, Coach, doubleheaders are very difficult to sweep. That I don't care who you're playing, what the competition level is. It's hard to win both games in a doubleheader. And by the way, BYU is very capable. What OSU did to BYU, hey, BYU didn't look great this weekend. I think a lot of that had to do with the way that Oklahoma State made them look, though, because they played very well.
Yeah, you know, when you win the first game of a doubleheader 11-5, it's tough to come back, bounce back, and do it again in that same fashion. So one of the things that I thought was very impressive from the standpoint, and again, talking about BYU who struggled in Big 12 conference play and have been swept the last two series coming into this weekend, but taking care of business in the fashion that Oklahoma State did and winning the games in the way that they should win those games is, like you're saying, if you want to be a serious contender in the postseason, being able to do that in all three games and not winning an 8-6 ball game or barely pulling one out or something of that nature. And again, to the testament that you're talking about of, being able to do that in back-to-back games of a doubleheader is what OSU needed to do in order to stay on track and be the team that we think they're going to be in the postseason of making some noise. So, again, taking care of business in the right fashion and whether it's a doubleheader or if it's in a midweek game or any of the three games on the weekend, it was good to see them, again, bounce back from a tough weekend last weekend and handle those games in the manner that they should handle them if they're going to be the team that we think they're capable of being.
I think I know where you're going to head with this question, Carson Benge. But what stuck out for you to you this weekend? Ian Daugherty was fantastic. Hey, Gabe Davis, he looked insanely good again. Brian Holiday got back on track. He was the Bulldog that we've come to know and love for the Cowboys. So what stuck out to you for the most?
Well, offensively, what stuck out to me the most is, seeing Nolan Schubert starting to get hot. And you start thinking about it and him being out. We talked early on in the season about the injuries and how they were missing him in the lineup. If you really think about it, with the 2 or 3 weeks that he missed, he's just now in mid-season form, right? Even though we're past the mid-season point in the schedule, he's really just now getting into the mid-season part of his season because of the time he's missed. And you're starting to see what that's producing, right? So Nolan Schubert going 9 for 15 with 3 home runs and scoring the ball up routinely over the weekend was great to see. Like you said, Gabe Davis, it stuck out to me. Looked much more comfortable in the role that he was this weekend. It's kind of what we talked about last weekend. Interesting to see how that's going to play out. Was Carson Benge your Friday starter because you wanted to keep your guys on the regular routine of being game, or is this the new look? So, I thought Gabe Davis looked incredible and in that role that he had kind of had early on the season and looked a lot more confident, went out and dominated. And then, like you said, Ian Daugherty just continuing to stay hot. We've said his name, 3 or 4 podcasts, 3 or 4 weeks in a row now, and just continuing to do great things at the plate. I think he was 6 for 13 with a couple home runs last week. So anyway, that was the one thing that stuck out to me, though, mentioning all those things. The one thing that I like to highlight is kind of, Ryan Bogus. We haven't mentioned his name.
Yes, Bogey.
And, I think the last time we really mentioned him or talked about him at length was the midweek game against OU several weeks back, right? And for him to come in and throw in 2 different games and threw 3 2/3 innings and struck out 8 and walked to 0, right, and gave up 1 hit. So again, going out and taking care of business in the fashion that it should be taken care of if you want to be the team that we think this team can be in the postseason. What really stuck out to me was, the names that we mentioned and talked about a lot with Schubert and Benge and Daugherty and those guys that contribute on a regular basis. But to see Bogus come out and throw in 2 different games and have a lot of success and face 12 batters and struck out 8 of them, right, and gave up 1 hit. I think that was what stuck out to me most glaringly of somebody that we, haven't talked a lot about here recently that continues just to be a staple in that bullpen and produce every time he comes to the mound and gets inserted. And again, it looks like the confidence of the coaching staff that they have in him to bring him in 2 different ball games, right?
Yeah.
So back to back, he throws in the midweek game against Oral Roberts, and then throws 2 2/3 in game 1 against BYU. So that's what stuck out to me is, the offensive production from the guys that should be producing, and again, I think that's a great testament to, like I've said multiple times already, but taking care of it in the manner that it should have been taken care of. But Bogus coming in and looking really well, looking really good, and the 2 different appearances that he had was what stuck out to me.
Couple of things. That damn jinx against Oral Roberts. God dang, man. It just seemed like for 10, maybe 30 years. Hell, I don't know. It just seemed like whatever could go wrong. I mean, it was like, I don't know, it was like it was a Bermuda Triangle every time we played them. That jinx is over. Thank God, because that was really annoying.
Yeah.
And then also, we hit on this quite a bit last week, but it's worth mentioning again. You have the 2 gut punches. The Cowboys responded last Sunday. Josh Holiday is so good at getting his teams to mentally rebound. And, I mean, just almost immediately now, just a couple games later, they're playing as good as they have all year and doing it without Aiden Miola and Tyler Wolford.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand the job that Josh has done in the last 9 days with this club.
Yeah, if you've been around baseball at all for any period of time, you understand the concept that one of the advantages that baseball has over other sports is normally you get to play the next day, right?
Yeah.
If you have a bad day, you're not having to sit around for a whole week until you get to play again like you do in football, or 3 or 4 days like you do in basketball, or the same thing in wrestling. You get to go out and compete pretty quickly after that. That being said, there's 2 different ways that can go, right? And
right.
If you're struggling, right, and you have to turn right around and play again the next day, that struggle may continue, right? Or, like you're talking about in the example of OSU baseball and the job that this coaching staff does is being able to turn that struggle into a positive the next day or the next game, right? And so being able to go from a huge disappointment, I don't know if it's huge disappointment, but a disappointing weekend last weekend against K-State to then turn that around and produce and play the way you did on Tuesday against Oral Roberts and through the entire series against BYU is the testament that you're talking about to Josh Holiday and the staff of helping those guys move forward emotionally and mentally so that they can produce the next time that they're up. So, again, I think the psychological side of this game that everybody understands that's been a part of it for any length of time, how well Josh and his staff approach that and take care of that side of it with the players that they have. They all have the physical attributes, right?
Yep.
But being able to get them and keep them or move them into a mental state that is positive for them to move on after a disappointing weekend or a phase of struggle is something that they do very, very well.
I wanted to also give a shout out to Victor Romero and Mark Ginther. I have got to meet both of those guys. I know Vic pretty well, get to work some camps with them. And I can tell you, super positive, but very bottom line. It's not cheerleaderish positive. It's positive like, hey, we're not going to sit around and feel sorry for yourself. We don't have time to. Nobody else is going to. We're going to come up with a solution. We're going to fix it, and we're going to move on. So wanted to give out shout outs to those two guys. And I just think that the mental aspect of all that is simply fantastic. I found it interesting that you kind of used the word disappointing and then moved on real fast from that. Okay, I think you could say there were some disappointing moments that because the coaching staff is so positive and they move forward so well, they kept them from being disappointments overall. So I think that is very, very, very impressive. Carson Benge. Hey, Coach, we've seen a lot of individual performances in our life. The most impressive was Matt Brown when he was at Capitol Hill. He almost beat us by himself, and we were really good. We were a state semifinalist team that year, and he almost beat us by himself when he was at Capitol Hill. Hit one to the wall, hit a home run, also pitched that day. If you remember, he had that incredible career at Wichita State, made that great catch down the right field line, flipped over the wall. That Matt Brown, yeah. Most impressive day that I've ever seen any one guy have until last Thursday. I cannot believe what I saw with Carson Benge. Or maybe I can because you know this guy can do it, but wow.
Yeah, and it's almost like, how do you say it? It's almost like, okay, right? Because we've talked about him so much. We've seen him do so much already this season. And, and for me to write down kind of the things that stuck out in my mind of this past week, whether it was against Oral Roberts, against BYU, and I don't even write down his name. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like you said, has one of the most impressive individual performances over a span of a week that you can remember in recent history, and it's not even something I write down. It's just because he does it all the time, right? He's always losing at the plate. I mean, I think there's been one little, struggle he had one weekend that he didn't perform at the plate very well, but every other week it's just like, okay, yeah, that's Carson Benge. He's going to do his thing, next guy up, right? And but it's just, and that's a huge, I don't know, compliment or whatever you want to say to him, in that not only is that the expectation of him, and he knows that the expectation of him, and that how he carried this ball club for the first half of the season on his back through the injuries and the lineup shuffles and that sort of thing, and for him to just go to the plate and consistently produce, and go to the mound and consistently produce, and be one of the best two-way players in the nation, to the point where guys like me, or your casual fan, or whatever the case is just like, oh yeah, now that you mention it, just because we've seen it so much from him, right? And so just you can't say enough good things about him, and there's part of you that wishes he would just tank it and struggle for the rest of the season so that we get him back next year.
Right.
What I mean? So,
pick it up for the playoffs.
Obviously I'm joking there, but you kind of get into a selfish mindset with guys like that oh yeah, he's draft eligible after this year because this is his third year, and that sort of thing, and hoping that maybe the scouts, everybody else, aren't paying as much attention to it as we are, but they are. But him with the expectation and the workload that's been put on him, and for him to carry this ball club and then continue to produce, whether it was the first of the season, middle of the season, or now when we're getting towards the 3/4 of the way through the season, is just very, very impressive. And it's the reason why he's known nationally as one of the best two-way players in the country. So, you can't say enough good things about what he's doing.
That's why I like them pitching him in the first game, because that allowed them to DH him in the last two games. Yeah. I think that does give him a little bit of a mental break, and definitely a physical break to not have to play those last two games in the field. I think that was a very good strategy for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's not like we've talked about multiple times. It's these guys. Every one of these kids on this team have the physical attributes, right? But to go through a season and maintain the emotional and the mental capacity to be able to go up and have the correct approach at the plate every at-bat, or have the correct mental approach when you're on the mound, when you know that they're physically tired, right? Again, goes back to what we were talking about, the psychological and mental side that Josh and them do so well with those guys. And part of that is, like you're talking about, putting them in places in the lineup where they can have a chance to be successful when they know whether they're physically tired or emotionally tired or whatever the case is. So, yeah, you know that we talked about last week that how physically exhausted he looked coming off the field.
Yes.
Right? You mentioned that in the last podcast. And obviously it looked like that was noticed by the coaching staff as well. So, great job or great move of putting him in a DH role where, I've heard Tom Holliday talk on the simulcast about how, in reference to Matt Holliday when he was in the major leagues and that sort of thing, about how many games it takes off your career every time you hit the ground. Every time your body hits the ground, whether you're sliding or diving for a ball or whatever the case is, you're sliding into a base or diving for a ball in the outfield. That's taking lifespan off of your career, right? And so for the coaches to be able to recognize that and know that, and because Carson Benge is not going to not lay out for a ball or not dive head first into a base when he has the opportunity. So for them to be able to give him some rest in that capacity is very beneficial for this team and him mentally, but also for the lifespan of his career.
And it goes to show, you mentioned this last week, how, this team has come to rely on all of its guys, like a Lane Forsythe, like an Ian Daugherty, the guys that aren't maybe the Nolan Schubert that are going to become the All-Americans for that season, or even the prospects down the line. It also goes to show just how much confidence Josh Holliday, Rob Walton, Victor Romero, and Mark Ginther have in the rest of those guys, right?
Absolutely. And, like I said a while ago, I think we mentioned Ian Daugherty's name and talked about him at length for the last 3 or 4 weeks and what he's producing, from my standpoint, 6 or 8 years down the road, right, one of the things that's going to stick out to me about this team is, Nolan Schubert being able to square one up and hit it 500 feet or whatever the case is, but how big a role that Ian Daugherty and Charlie Carter and those type of guys had in the situations with the injuries that took place on this team, right?
100%.
And this team would not be in the position that they are in if it weren't for the Lane Forsythes and Ian Daughertys and the Charlie Carters and the Avery Ortizes and the Donovan LaSalle's. And you can go back and talk about, if Donovan LaSalle's name never gets mentioned again in OSU history, he's going to go down in lore being a serial killer, right? And hitting that bomb against the Sooners, right? And so those guys producing at the right moments in difficult situations, in pressure situations, when, if you had to write the lineup out before the season started, half those guys may not even been mentioned, right? But because of the injuries, they were plugged in and they produced. And not only is that a testament.
And Josh expected them to produce. Absolutely. He did not allow them an out or an excuse either.
Absolutely. And not only did those kids expect to produce when they went to the plate or went onto the field, but they were prepared, right?
Yes.
And I talked about that multiple times about one of the things that this staff does, in my opinion, the best is being able to have those guys prepared because of the individual competitions that they're producing day in and day out, whether it's practice or in the game. And that it doesn't surprise you to see, Colin Ritchie in the line in the leadoff spot or in the 4-hole, or Zach Earhart in the leadoff spot in the 4-hole, or pinch hit somebody that ends up getting a big hit, and you think, my gosh, where's this guy been? Going back to Donovan LaSalle, where he hadn't played since middle of February, and he gets inserted into the lineup in I think it was in the 4-hole, right? And against Bedlam and hits the big bomb. So it's fun to watch how, these guys are continually prepared and have success at the plate or in the field or on the mound because of the preparation that has taken place all fall and now in the spring. And those guys have the best opportunity to be successful because when preparation meets opportunity, right? And that's when kids can be successful, is when they're prepared and they have the opportunity and they're able to go up there and produce. So, very impressive.
Absolutely. Another part of that is I also think kind of like Matt Holliday and Josh himself and Dave Holliday, who's a scout in the Phillies system, and Tom Holliday, they are the perfect example of what I'm getting ready to say. This is a team like Ian Daugherty, Lane Forsythe, Colin Ritchie, Zach Earhart, Nolan Schubert, Carson Benge, all these, Colin Brigham, and Avery Ortiz, all these guys. Okay, I'm missing a whole bunch of guys. Brian Holliday would be the perfect example too. Okay, if these guys go on to be millionaires someday, which I hope they all become millionaires and they all donate back to OSU, right? But if they all become multi millionaires, you know where you're going to find them? You're going to find them somewhere on a baseball field throwing batting practice, hitting fungos, teaching the game to somebody, because even if they have the money to be anywhere in the world, they're going to choose to be on a baseball field. Yeah. I really get that vibe from these kids.
Absolutely. And, we've talked about that at length too, of at this level, okay, and I'm just going to say college athletics in general, right, is that it's a job, right? And this isn't something that you can like to do, right?
Yeah.
It's something that you have to love to do. And it's no secret why.
You can't fake it.
Can't fake it. It's no secret why, like you're saying, when these guys, when their playing career ends, whether it's after they graduate OSU or if they play in the minors for a few years or if they actually make it to the major leagues, whatever the case is, right? When their career ends, it's no secret that for the next 20 years, if you look them up on Google or something, they're somewhere around baseball. Whether they've opened up their own academy where they're teaching kids, or they've opened up their own, or they've started their own travel ball team system from 8U all the way up, or whatever the case is, or coaching on a staff somewhere around the country. It's because they love the sport, right? And I think you see that more. That's probably another aspect of baseball that may be different than other sports, is just the continuity of the individual to the sport, right? In that I don't know that you see, and maybe it's just because I'm a bigger baseball fan than I am other sports, but I don't know that you see that as much in other sports as you do baseball. And it's like you play it so much and you play it so early on, right? I've got a 4-year-old son that's got his first T-ball game tomorrow, right? And some of these guys are in that same situation, that they're going to be doing the same thing when they're 64 years old as they were when they were 4 years old.
Yep.
And that is loving the game of baseball, being around it in some way, shape, fashion, or form, and contributing. And what you hear all the time is giving back to the sport, right? And trying to teach the next generation of kids the ins and outs and the ways and the proper way to play the game.
I think their head coach is that way. I think he finds guys that have that same mentality, the guys that he wants to be around that love the game of baseball the way that he does, and I think it absolutely works. Okay, so moving on, Coach. We have a midweek game. I'm not going to lie, I don't even know who the midweek game it's against because I'm already looking forward to them Longhorns, right? Hey, by the way, that was glorious in the sense that OU and Texas, they duked it out. They beat each other, and then they went like 1,000 innings, and then they were all pissed when they left. I thought that was just so great. And then, by the way, the weekend ended where OSU is only one game behind OU and ahead of Texas. That could not have worked out any better as an OSU fan.
Yeah, beautiful. I absolutely love it that they called the game after the 7th inning. Right? And so, I mean, everybody leaves. I mean, you don't even get a chance, right? I mean, you don't even get a chance to come back. So anyway, for OSU to be sitting in the situation they are, and pretty much now it's up to you, OSU. You're not relying on somebody else, right? Go out there and take care of business this next weekend against the Longhorns, and we'll see what happens on the other side of that coin. But go out and do what you did. And I going back to what we started the podcast with, right? OSU showing up this week and doing what they needed to do in the fashion that they should have done it, right? Yeah. Gives you a lot of excitement for this next weekend going into Texas and being able to possibly, leave the weekend at the top of the Big 12 standings. So, and we talked about that too. How much does that really mean? Because not everybody plays everybody. I don't know, right? But it may not mean much to people externally when they're looking at standings in your conference when, not everybody's playing each other. But internally, to continue the momentum and continue to build confidence for your team is huge moving towards the latter half of the season.
Of course, OU does have a fairly favorable schedule to end the season, but like you said, if OSU does what they're supposed to, if they can just get tied with everybody, the teams that are at the top, OSU, OU, Texas, and West Virginia, if Oklahoma State can win this series this weekend, they will have won every series against those teams. So they would have every type of tiebreaker scenario that you could possibly think of because they have the head-to-head on every single one of those teams. So, yeah, a huge weekend, Coach. It was a lot of fun. The BYU weekend, still bummed I didn't get to see any Oklahoma State baseball. Over the weekend, of course, Saturday we were dodging tornadoes. And then Sunday, the Cowgirls had a great senior day where Scotland David got to walk it off in the last inning for the run rule. So it was a great weekend. Final thoughts?
Yeah, just end like we always end, and just excited to continue to see this team gain more confidence and get hot at the right time and just, watching what we've talked about from the very beginning of the season of the potential of this postseason, the late run that the Pokes are making, and the guys getting hot at the right time. And I think we're getting closer to what we talked about last weekend where, I still don't think that we've had a good stretch of the season where our pitching staff and our offense has been hot at the same time. And I think we're getting closer to seeing that. And so, I'm just continue to be excited to watch them play, and real excited to watch them play this weekend against Texas to see. It doesn't matter where rankings fall. It's Texas, right? Texas baseball.
Yeah.
Texas baseball. You're talking about two blue bloods going at it, right? Two teams that are at the top of the records of college baseball when you're looking at individual performances or team performances or postseason appearances or College World Series appearances. You're talking about two blue blood programs that are going at it this weekend. It's going to be fun to watch.
It absolutely is. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to another edition of OkState Daily. Coach, I want to thank you for joining, and I want to say to everybody, go Pokes, beat the Horns, and whoever it is that we play in the midweek.
Go Pokes.